Good afternoon. I understand I have the post-lunch crowd, so everybody's coming in. I wanted to give everybody a few extra minutes. But welcome to Maximizing Event Budgets, Creative Sponsorship Strategies. My name is Jennifer Bialik, and I am the Director of Sponsorships here at Cvent. I'm not sure what I was thinking doing a session in the middle of my Super Bowl, but bear with me. I'm really excited to talk about it, though, and hear from each of you as well. So let's get started. So please have the event app out and open. We'll be doing some polls. I went ahead and opened those so you guys can answer them so we can see where we stand when we get there. And then Q&A. You can ask questions in the app. We also have a mic runner to ask questions. I really want to hear from you guys too, and hope everybody in the room can share their experiences as well. So a little about me. I've been working in sponsorship sales, sponsorship strategy for about 20 years. I started off with a small nonprofit called the Association of Corporate Travel Executives and stayed there for 10 years, got thrown into the role of sponsorship and absolutely loved it. I had the opportunity to travel all over the world, do events with amazing sponsors and brands, and work with some amazing people. From there, I went to a larger nonprofit called the National Active and Retired Federal Employees Association, about 200,000 members. We did a 1,000 person conference every other year. I also wore the hat of event planner at that company. Both companies, I was a Cvent customer. So when the role opened up at Cvent for sponsorship about 5 years ago, I was super excited to come work here and do what I love for a brand that I love and get to work with in my industry still of meetings and events and travel and hospitality. So, and I have had the opportunity to meet some amazing people like Henry Winkler, who was my keynote once. And I do have 3 children and I live in Rhode Island. So first poll, I want to learn a little bit about you guys. What is your role? Do you sell sponsorship? Do you manage an event that has a sponsorship component? Or does sponsorship impact your role in another way? Just so I can understand. Let's see here. Let those refresh. So interesting. It looks like about 50% of respondents sell sponsorship and about 50% oversee an event with sponsorship components. So hopefully this will be helpful to all of you. I want to spend some time really looking at the life cycle of sponsorship and that process from preparing to sell to prospecting and actually selling to executing your sponsorships on site, the follow-up, all of this leading to loyalty, renewals, and relationships. And I'm going to go into detail on each of these. So the sponsorship prospectus, in my opinion, is the single most important document. And a lot of people, I think, take it for granted or maybe, put a list together or a menu. But really, this is our sponsorship prospectus, this QR code. I wasn't able to add a label there because I'm still new at beautiful AI. But so you can take a look at what we do here at Cvent Connect. But really, the sponsorship prospectus can be an amazing tool for you to scale your program and train your team and make sure you're very clear with your customers about what's available. So there's 3 components: attendee demographics, who will be there, what is their buying power, opportunities themselves, right? These are the sponsorships. And then the extras, right? All the things that complement the sponsorship or add on to it, or the benefits, things like that. So diving into some detail on the attendee demographics. So this part, I think early on in my career, was probably 2 or 3 pages of some bar charts and pie charts of, who's there. And Cvent taught me that really preparing for this a year in advance with your current event can help you so much more. So attendee personas, this is who your event is marketing to, who's at the event. And I feel like you never know what persona might be of interest to your prospective sponsor. For example, I think, okay, great, everybody wants to reach the planners here, but we have 4 or 5 attendee personas, and they'll say, wow, we actually have a whole different budget for event marketers. And the fact that you have both at your event opens up a lot more money. So that defining your personas, thinking outside the box and of everyone that could be there in their roles. Buyer-supplier ratio, I'm sure we all do this. This is super important, that the supplier feel like there are more buyers than suppliers at the event. Who the buyers want to meet with. So this is actually a question in our registration form. It says, when you're at Connect, who do you want to meet with? And they list all the different types of vendors or suppliers they want to meet with, and we put it in the book. And then when we're going through it with prospective sponsors, they're like, oh, they are looking to meet with our type of company. So it's like a great just light bulb moment for them. Breaking down the buying power. So this means just really talking about your attendees' buying power. In my example for event planners, how many room nights do they contract, right? My hotel sponsors want to know that. Or what types of events do they plan? Do they plan, large trade shows or small VIP events or incentive trips? All that will change my sponsor's perspective of the type of planner that they're targeting. And then, of course, geographic reach. So opportunity breakdown. So the next section of the prospectus is the sponsorship opportunities. And this is super important, and I think this is what's changing so much lately. I take this section, I divide it into 3 parts. Thought leadership, everybody wants to speak, right? So we kind of create these very pre-designed sponsorship opportunities that give them the opportunity to be that thought leader in a defined space. Brand-focused opportunities and networking opportunities. So the great thing about breaking these down into these categories is that if your sponsor is looking at something and it's already sold, a similar opportunity is right next to it. Or maybe they went in thinking, I definitely want to sponsor the lanyards, but they didn't know that there were some other opportunities that are less well known. So I like categorizing, it helps with the conversation. And you can cross-sell. So we'll talk a little bit more about this later, but they complement each other nicely. If you have a large sponsor who's trying to find ways to diversify their spend, you don't want them to have all their sponsorships in one category, so you would be able to look in different areas. This is something that we just did more of last year. So my prospectus, and I wish I had a picture from before, but it used to just be a page with like a photo and like 2 or 3 lines describing the sponsorship. And we would get all these questions. Well, what's exactly included? And then when we were doing the contract, we were trying to figure out what all the benefits they got. So here, this year, we redid it, so it's very clear. Sponsorship, a visual, the price, a little description, and exactly what's included. So as we grow our sponsorship team, we have 2 or 3 people who are designing the whole program, but the salespeople are able to take these bullet points of benefits, put it right into the contract, and it's very clear throughout the whole process. And just leaves nothing to be decided on later or to be after they agree on it and it wasn't clear, all of that. So this is another important stage of designing your prospectus, is doing research on your competing events. So this doesn't necessarily mean your competitors, but really, what events are your sponsors looking at besides yours? And so I always dig through all the other prospectuses and see, what are they offering? What are they pricing at? I know the size of their event. If it's the similar size or if it's bigger, I would keep that in mind. And then I also what's included, what the pricing is, what type of offerings they're doing, who are their sponsors and exhibitors, and how are they upselling them? So I just get tons of inspiration. I also look at prospectuses from other totally unrelated events. I look up the Dental Hygienist Association to see what they're doing. Are you in the room? Okay. Which I'm sure you have a fantastic conference, and I want to be inspired. I look at Salesforce Dreamforce, right? I mean, why not reach for the stars? I want to see everything everyone's doing at their events. I go to Google, I type in sponsorship prospectus, and I look at them all. But here are what I've found as the top trending sponsorship opportunities out there right now. High impact experiences. These are so hot, especially with really large sponsors. They want a lasting impression. They want to be buzzworthy. They want to be highly branded. They want the celebrity singer at the closing reception. Buzzworthy, high impact experiences are great. F&B experiences. There's a trend. It's very experiential, interactive, personalized. F&B experiences, we have a bunch of them here. The coffee bar turned martini bar sponsored by ISG, and the Rosé All Day, which I believe is down in the trade show. These F&B experiences allow you to infuse your event with fun, unique F&B experiences, but also allow the sponsors to have a standalone branded opportunity because, and I meant to mention this earlier, but no longer are a sea of logos of benefit to them, right? So logo recognition and complimentary registrations, those days I feel like where we could say, okay, $20,000, you get your logo on a sign, you get to come and you get leads. It's like they want more. And they really want this branding opportunity. So targeted audience networking. So this is one of my favorite things that I bubbled up this year. We offered it a few years in a row, but hadn't really sold it. But in this example, at Cvent Connect, we have meetups, which are targeted little networking opportunities by industry vertical. So we take all the event planners in the financial service industry and we say, you guys should get together and network. It's great, right? And you get to share, commonalities and all that. And then we have a sponsor who's targeting financial services industry, or that's their main bread and butter. And so they get, out of the 4,000 or whatever it is people here, to find their target audience in a small networking opportunity. They get branding and they get to network, they get the leads. So those type of things, kind of making the conference relatable to sponsors, especially the smaller ones who aren't interested necessarily in everybody, they just want the niche and they're trying to find them. I think creating those experiences for your attendees and then having them sponsorable is great. Lounges and wellness. I'll tell a story here. So I struggled with the lounge sponsorship for a while. I was like, yep, they get their logo outside the door. They can be in there to talk to people. And, our team talked and we felt that should be priced in our prospectus at $75,000. And so surprisingly, we didn't sell it for a couple of years. And I was like, guys, I think this is priced really high. So I was talking to a sponsor and I was like, what would make this valuable to you? And I can't believe I don't ask more often, but just ask. And he was like, he actually came up with a whole list of things. He's like, can you put an RFID trace out the room so that you can actually capture these so we're not trying to bug people all the time? And we were like, yes. And then they were like, can you put a video, like a monitor in the room and scroll our sizzle reel? Cost us like $150. Sure. Huge branding for them, not just static logo, but like, a visual, and they can change it out each day. And I'm trying to think what else they asked. They had some really good insight onto how they personally, as a company, measure ROI, and they could link it directly to this sponsorship to amplify it and really make it worth the dollar amount that we had placed on it. Because we knew the potential. We knew that there would be a lot of activity in this lounge, and they're going to get a lot of recognition. But adding those few little things really helped. And wellness also, we talked a little bit about breaking up the space of the lounge to be a workspace or like a Zen space, which coincidentally is also the name of our pod sponsor, but just wellness, if using those type of things, you can break it into half. We actually have a wellness room and then a lounge, so lots of different ways if you're looking to add more opportunities to break that up. And then CSR activities. So this is a great sponsorable option that I think sponsors find valuable because it aligns with their sustainability or their different initiatives they have. We partnered with Periodicals, who is amazing. Many of you may have attended their sessions yesterday, but they basically come to an event and they work with a group of 100 or 200 attendees to create a box that gets delivered at the end of the event to a local children's hospital. So it's about like leaving something good behind when you come into a city and giving back to the locally and all that. And they're amazing. And so they come to events and you can get it sponsored. You can bring them in and get it sponsored to offset their cost. There's also Fill It Forward, which is the water bottles. Very sponsorable. They work with sponsors to give a donation to everybody who gets the water bottle. So these different CSR and sustainability sponsorships, there's so many of them out there. And they're sponsorable and they add to your event, and everyone seems to love them. Okay. You probably can't see this slide very well. So sponsor benefits. So the way that we design our sponsor program is that you go through the book and you pick what you want to sponsor, and then you get basically standard benefits, except for the top two lines. So the amount of your sponsorship dictates what level you're in. So let's say you want to sponsor the business lounge and it's $75,000. So you are a gold level sponsor. So you're going to get 3 complimentary registrations, 8 for your clients. Everybody gets logo recognition, opportunity to be an attendee hub. But our gold level sponsors also get promotion on social media. And then our platinum level sponsors get a guest blog post and a dedicated push message. So we tried to do this, and the reason we do this is because when we sell a sponsorship, let's say and I'll talk a little bit about this later, but let's say we sell something for $40,000, and we're like, well, if you added on a $10,000 meetup, you'd be at gold level, you'd get those additional benefits. So it kind of incentivizes more spend and packaging. And it makes it easy to execute those contracts. So everybody gets all these standard things. And so our team who executes, it's like, boom. There's always specific deliverables with the specific sponsorship they've picked, but then there's universal or standard benefits that everybody gets. And so the scaling and execution is easy. Okay, second poll. Which types of opportunities do your attendees ask for the most? Thought leadership, branding, or networking? Networking, wow, 62% networking, 29% thought leadership, and 8% branding. So yes, I feel like it is very, very difficult to just do branding now, and it's really challenging. But yeah, I think we have a question. Does that...
We have a live question in the Q&A.
Yeah.
It says, I'm curious if you cover production costs for activations or just charge a fee and they design pay for the production.
Yes, this is actually an ongoing debate internally here with our team and the planning team trying to decide the best way to do this. Do we say, okay, you can sponsor the rosé all day and you pay for the space, but you're responsible for the build and the F&B? Or do we package it all together and there's a larger price where it's all included and you just show up? Is that, whoever asked that question, is that what you're talking about, like production and build built into the price or separate? And we do it both ways because we haven't decided which one we like better. I, as the salesperson and the sponsor, it's easier to sell if it's packaged. I feel like it's very turnkey. They just want to show up. They don't want to contact me for the contract of the space, then contract the caterer for the F&B, and then contract the service provider to build the build. So it's a little more cumbersome, although they do have the ability to customize more. The other side of the coin is that we have to understand the cost a year ahead of time of what the build is, what the F&B was. We have to look at last year's, to see about what it was so that we can make sure that the price that we're putting in the prospectus is not going to lose us money. And we have to set very tight parameters on what that build looks like and anything above and beyond. And I think actually my slide right here where I had the picture here, like it says very specifically that this puppy park includes turf, entrance, signage, park benches, and 2 10-foot trees. If they want to add a 48-inch monitor, that's on their own. And so this goes into the contract, like I was saying. And so there's lots of different ways to do it. I see pros and cons. Obviously, in terms of our sponsorship revenue, it hits our sponsorship revenue when we roll it all in higher, but then our expenses more. And then if we don't, it hits the lower revenue but less expenses. If they pay for everything a la carte, so pros and cons. We haven't made a decision yet. What else?
2 quick ones, I think.
Yeah.
What does CSR stand for?
Corporate social responsibility. Maybe this is the wrong term, but this is really do good, right? Make sure you're giving back, sustainability, local community, all of that. And I think a lot of the sponsors that I work with, they have, aligning sponsor dollars with those type of efforts is encouraged and helps them get those approved better, easily.
And then how do you decide how to price your packages?
Yes. So really, this is a couple of things. One, I compare to the other prospectuses who have similar size audiences and similar industries, right? Similar types of exhibitors and suppliers and buyers. The other thing is that if one year all of the meetups sold out in a week, I know they're probably priced a little low. Like I should price them higher and make it a little more competitive because they're very valuable. We have a couple of people who fight over this one sponsorship opportunity every year, so I'm going to raise the price next year because the value is probably too low. So year over year, really looking at the interest level. We have an opportunity that's not taken for several years in a row. It might be priced too high or the benefits aren't matching the value. So really understanding we're covering our cost, year over year interest, and then my competitors. Competing shows, not necessarily competitors. Yeah, anything else?
We do have one more. It's
Good.
a 2-part, and you might be answering this in a future slide, but let us know if you want to hold off. But
okay.
If your targeted meetups, how do you manage the registration process for that versus a proposal cost for the sponsor? And then how do you guarantee X number of registrations to sell that package?
Really good question. And this is a great question. Okay, so the meetups are basically set up as a session, and they're only available to certain personas. So we know which event planners are in the financial services industry, and we add the meetup to their schedule, add the meetup to their available sessions, and they can add it to their schedule. So we know, let's say 150 people signed up for this financial services meetup, but we also know year over year that there is a 40% attrition, and that not all 150 people are going to show up. So the other thing is, this is something we're going to do anyway, and we do anyway, so it's kind of like a bonus if we get it sponsored. And the sponsorship is a sign outside the meetup, the ability to attend, because it's only open to financial service planners and then that one sponsor, and then the leads. So we set up an RFID trace outside of the meetup so that everybody going in gets captured, and then afterwards my sponsor gets the leads of everybody who was in that financial services meetup. So those are the 3 benefits. We were going to do pretty much all that anyway, except for the sign, which was, $150. The RFID truss really allows for us to, I think, measure the number of people that come in, the traffic, and then how we price it, we just sort of picked a equivalent price for similar sized networking events, and it seemed to work good in that we sold them all, but it did take us the full 6 months to sell them all, so I think it's a good price, and you kind of have to play around with it. But a couple of my sponsors added gifting elements, and one added champagne, so they can certainly add on to amplify their meetup. We also sold a gifting sponsorship for all the meetups, so that they all had a little gift in them, and that was done by another sponsor who wanted to just gift everybody. And so there was a couple of ways to get sponsorship and people involved in those meetups. That's how we did that. Anything else for now? Any other questions about this area of things? I know we're sort of right at the end of the prospectus itself. And before I dive into prospecting though, anything else about the prospectus? Yeah.
I just had one quick question, and if you addressed this already, I walked in a little late. Do you find that there are advantages to right of first refusal for your sponsorship?
That's a really good question. For larger sponsors. So I would almost dictate that like everybody who's 20,000 and above gets a right of first right of refusal on their sponsorship. They have a limited amount of time to take it. And if we have somebody else interested, we're going to give them an even smaller window. But I do like to offer that. It's never guaranteed. There are times where we don't want to invite a sponsor back, or we don't want to, maybe they violated some of the rules and stuff like that. So there's always exceptions, but whenever possible, we do first right of refusal. But I can't do it to every single sponsor, but certainly those are at a higher level. That's my thoughts on that. Yeah.
Related to that question, do any of your higher sponsorship levels, like with Platinum, do they get to preview any of your sponsorships in advance so they can see like what new things you're offering that they might be interested in?
That's a great idea. We don't do that, but I do love that. Really kind of giving them that first preview of the book this year. I feel like whenever it comes out, where everybody's like, oh, I need the book, and so we just actually tried to get it out in time for this event so that we could be talking about it. And I do think that's a great idea to say, okay, look, and you can even add it to your list of platinum benefits, preview, first viewing of opportunities for next year. So I love that. Oh, yeah.
How do you share your perspectives? Like, do you just email it?
Oh.
I was just asking, how do you share your perspectives? Like, do you email it out to everybody? Or, like, how do you present that? Like, do you do a webinar? Like, how do you sell that and get people interested in it in the first place?
Yes, that is a great segue to this next section where I talk a little bit about the prospecting process. And I want to remember that specifically because I think I do cover it, but I want to go into more detail. So prospecting, once you have your prospectus all done and you're ready to share it out, understanding your sponsor's budget cycle. This is something that I still am working towards documenting somewhere, maybe in Salesforce or something. I know most of them, but there's a few that have a different budget cycle, so it's easier to remember those. But understanding your sponsor's budget cycle is so important because if I go to them in August and they're like, oh, we just wrapped up budgeting for next year, and my event's in May, then it's like I'm asking for leftover funds. Whereas if I understand their budget cycle, and let's say majority is January to December, so we release our prospectus in September when they're doing that budget process and deciding what they want to do differently or budget for is great. But if there's a few exceptions that do July to June, then I want to make sure I get to them first in June with like a special preview or something where I'm mindful of their budget cycle. Throughout the whole process, asking questions, and I'll talk a little bit more about that, and then treating renewals differently than new business. So here at Cvent, we have two groups of salespeople. We have people who work just on renewals and people who just work on new business. And I think that's very intentional, and I'll talk a little bit more about why. And then doing your homework, understanding who the sponsors are before you speak with them and what types of events they're sponsoring now, anything you can look up beforehand, their history with your company, things like that. So types of questions to ask potential sponsors when you're on the phone with them. So you're in that meeting and you're a renewals rep and you're only handling renewals. So talk about last year. This is something that hopefully you took notes on. Hopefully you reviewed their feedback survey from the year before. But what was their experience like? How does it compare to the other events they've done since your event last year? And then numbers, you know how many leads they got. Like I always go back into the exhibitor resource center and pull their lead report from the year before. And I'm like, wow, you had, 200 leads and you had 50 requests for appointments at your single booth. It's probably gonna be ready to upgrade to a double booth. And then just understanding going in, so if they had 0 leads, you're like, going in that they're gonna be like, we had no leads. And it's like, okay, what can we do differently? Well, did you do, we'll talk more about that in a second. So challenges. Hopefully but are there any doubts or challenges they have? Like have all those conversations in the renewal. New business, which is actually what I handle new business, any new sponsors that come. And that first phase of Cvent and why I talk a lot more about who the company is, all of that. So getting to know them, who is their target audience, setting up their profile in your CRM so that you are really clear about who their target audience is. Is it typical? Maybe they have somebody that is different as you go through those personas and stuff. What products and services they offer. And then just ask a ton of questions. I think I've seen this a few times throughout this event, and it's so true, but how do they currently market their product? You'd be surprised how many people are having a conversation with me about sponsorship, and they're like, yeah, we purely operate on word of mouth now, and we're trying to venture into that. And I'm like, oh my gosh, where you chose? Like, this is an honor. I love that we're going to take you guys up, and they're looking to expand, and they're using sponsorship marketing to do that. So do they sponsor other events? What other events? What sponsorships do they choose at those events? How has their experience been in doing those sponsors? Does it work for them? Can they replicate it? Or should they try something different? And how do they measure success? I didn't put this in the renewals because we should have already asked it. But is success measured by number of leads, number of impressions, number of meetings, actual business generated? Do they track the attribution from the event and the lead and whether it results in business, or is that not as important as just pure number of leads, and that's how they decide who gets the sponsorship dollars? How do they measure ROI? This is sort of the same question, but yeah, lead generation versus brand recognition, and then booked business. And then package. So this is something, when I'm having these conversations, it's a lot about, so I was just in a meeting this morning, actually, with a sponsor who wants to renew. They're like, we want to do the same thing next year. This has been amazing. And I was like, what if, do you feel like there was a component of the event where you didn't exist and, you wanted to have exposure in more places? And we talked about packaging a smaller meetup, actually, and then going from a single booth to a double booth. And so their package will be like a big sponsorship, a smaller complimentary sponsorship, and then a double booth. And so really just making sure that you cover and package those things. I know some companies do sponsorship models that are prepackaged, right? Which is great as well. So I think that making sure they have different types of deliverables. Go ahead.
Excuse me. Do you offer startup packages for smaller businesses who can't afford a full sponsorship package? And how do you ensure they get enough visibility to make it worth their while to show up again next year?
Yes, so we do. I think that I really try to make sure that our prospectus has a wide range of sponsorship pricing, right? We have $5,000 opportunities, $100,000 opportunities. And the value of the opportunity is gonna be equivalent, right? So if you're a small business and you're coming in and you only have, the $7,000, this is where that meetup kind of comes into play, like, great. You should really focus on this. You're gonna get your really targeted audience. Or start with the booth, see how it goes, measure ROI, and build on that next year. And so we do a lot of entry-level sponsorships where we make sure that we have things that will still be valuable and impactful to them and allow them to at least get that data from us to say, this event is something we need to invest more in. But it's not going, we don't wanna, we have to know our value, and I can't give larger sponsorships to people who don't have that budget, but we still make sure, and I have great experience with this. A lot of my smaller sponsors or startup companies that sponsor are very grateful to be able to come in, be here, meet with their target audience in one way or another, and then usually can justify more budget the next year. So, what else?
What is the largest sponsorship you ever sold?
Largest sponsorship we have sold. I think we're a little bit unique because we are an event for event planners, and so we have a lot of interest from our industry to sponsor our event. But many of you may be in that situation. I mean, when I was in the corporate travel industry, a lot of the hotels and stuff that we work with were interested in the corporate travel managers and bringing their business to their hotels. So the larger sponsorships that we sell are closer to 1.7 million or so from a single sponsor, and we have to get very creative because I can't sell them my entire sponsor book. That would be ridiculous, and they just take everything away from all the other sponsors. So we really try to come up with custom sponsorships in that case. And maybe they'll do a exclusive sponsorship of a large evening event with a headline speaker and something really creative, and then we'll give general session time, which we'd never give to anybody, to these headline or very large sponsors. But I do think that is something that I struggle with because I'm very, adamant that we stay within our program, but then I want to make sure that these larger ones are accommodated. So is there anybody else in the room who has very large sponsors that struggles with how to accommodate them and maybe has found a solution that they want to share before I go on to the next question? No? Okay, well, yeah, I mean, really just customization and talking it through and coming up with a list together. What was the next question?
What are your thoughts on multi-year sponsorships?
Oh, yes, multi-year sponsorships. This is funny, I go back and forth on this. As a company, we love multi-year sponsorship. We want to lock in sponsors early. And I think it's great. I think it's good for the sponsor to lock in something that maybe is a competitive opportunity. Pros and cons. I think you have to have language that, should any of the, and I don't know the right language off the top of my mind right now, but something along if we feel like the relationship if the rules have been broken in any way, the second year will not take place. So that type of thing, because that has happened with a multi-year sponsorship with me before, where the sponsor took advantage or went outside the realm of their agreement and were not invited back. And so that language has to be in place. Also, if you want to change the opportunity that you're offering and you're in a multi-year deal, you have to wait for that to end before you can make that change. So pros and cons. Personally, I don't love them. I like doing just a new sponsorship every year. I think it actually helps the sponsor too to look at new things each year and diversify what they do. I was just talking to one of my sponsors who does the same thing every year, and I was like, I think you should mix it up. I know that you've kind of established that you're the sponsor of this every year, but is that really doing your brand good to be in the same thing and get the same things? Because there are other within your space. If networking is important, there's other networking that you can do. And so I think it's good. And if you do them, just be flexible. So if in the second year they decide they don't want it, they can take that value and apply it towards something else. All right. Any other questions? I do want to go back to your question about the prospectus, because I guess I didn't answer it in my slides. I thought I did. So at the end of the event, in the event survey, we ask if you're interested in sponsoring this event next year. So they get their prospectus for sure. We also go to a lot of trade shows and accumulate a list of exhibitors at those trade shows who would be interested in exhibiting at ours. So that's another lead generation. We have what's called a Marketo form on our website, so they can submit interest. I handle sponsorship for Connect US, Connect Europe, and then 4 Accelerate programs we do in Asia. And so I created a Marketo form just this year. I was able to do this. It was kind of surprising that it could be kind of difficult because they were so single event focused at a time sometimes. But I said, okay, here we're Connect US. Are you interested in sponsoring? And you would say, great, name, title, company, email. Are you interested in these other events we have? And I get a lot of times these Marketos come through and they'll say Connect US, and then it was additional, and it was and Connect Europe, and Connect Singapore. And so I love pairing the other events we do with the one that I'm asking if they're interested, because you just never know what else they might be interested in, what other markets they might be in. Are you interested in sponsoring webinars? Are you also interested in sponsoring podcasts? And so I'm trying to expand our offerings beyond events. And we do VIP dinners we'd love to get sponsored. And so kind of trying to gauge interest from people who've sponsored in the past or maybe new ones coming in on not just the event I'm working on now, but our whole portfolio. Oh, yes, question.
How many people are on your sponsorship execution team, and how are they structured to service all sponsors?
What was the second part?
How are they structured to service all sponsors?
So at Cvent, we do it a little differently because we're divided into an event cloud, which is planners, and a hospitality cloud, which is hotels and CVBs. And so I actually handle all the other suppliers that are not hotels and CVBs, like companies and swag and gifting and transportation. So there's me and one other person that handle this area. So there's 2 of us. We have about 98 sponsors and exhibitors here that we contracted with and brought to Connect. The other side of the hospitality side, there is probably 40 or 50 reps who sell other Cvent products and probably sell, a booth to all the hotels. This is why we have 200 hotels in our trade show. A couple months ago, I was put in charge of working with them on a consulting basis to get those hotels that always exhibit to actually start sponsoring. And so now I work with those 30 reps to sell sponsorship too, which is why I had to be really specific in my prospectus, because these are people who've never really sold sponsorship before, and they're like, well, what are the benefits? And I'm trying to give them the tools to sell, because they have this amazing list of prospective sponsors that are used to exhibiting but not used to sponsoring. It's kind of like it's just a different level of marketing for the salesperson and for the sponsor. And so, because we didn't have the team in place to sell it, we didn't have the team trained to sell it. We just haven't been. And so now we're going to scale that and start doing that. And I'm really excited. But yeah, that's how we do it. So we have 2 full-time and then several part-time on another team who has the audience. Okay, so executing on site, which is what I'm in the middle of right now. Actually, this is day 3. I've been here since Saturday, Sunday, so Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, yeah. So this is almost over. It's like if it's not done by now, it's not getting done. So it's all good, it's all good. I love the on-site part. You work for months and it finally comes to fruition, your sponsors are so happy, or little things go wrong and you address them, as soon as you can, as best you can, and you're having meetings with them. So take lots of photos. This is my first takeaway here. Take photos on site. I give a very large detailed shot list to my photographer, and I also give a large list to our social media team of activations to be taking pictures of and tagging and what their social tags are. But really these photos, I scour through them afterwards and I try to put them into the right folders and all that. For the sponsor, in general, I have sponsors who actually ask me in the contract, can you put photos of can your photographer just send me photos that he takes so we can use it in our own marketing? I do ROI reports, which I'll talk a little bit more about, and then I just realized there's a countdown clock. And I was like, what is this countdown clock? This is great. I thought it was gonna be like a 20-minute session. And then for marketing and promoting your sponsorship opportunities next year, so you can have those great photos. This is what it looked like last year. And so photos are so important. So on-site. This is what we do. We welcome them. I try and either leave a note in their hotel room or in their check-in thing, something from me that just says like, so exciting to see it all come to life. Looking forward to meeting you for the first time or seeing you again. We do something called dine-arounds where I invite my top sponsors out to dinner before the conference kicks off to just kind of like have fun, have a few drinks, or maybe we go play golf, or holy moly, or we did an escape game once. We had an escape game sponsor who gave those, so just really informal relationship building piece, and then we also have a formal one-on-one. So we sit down, usually about 75% through, and say like, how's it going? Like take their temperature on site in real time. Oh my God, this is great. Or, I'm not loving it, and like, what can you still do to rectify that? And then make sure you are seeing what their sponsorship is. I struggle with this a little bit because I have 98, but I probably have about 50 sponsorships, and I really try to see them all, or my colleague, because if I don't, then it's so hard to like talk to it or speak to it or even sell it. And so really making sure I stop by and like, oh, it looked great. Yes, this is great. And then afterwards sending a nice thank you note. Some of this is probably pretty straightforward. Yes, what's the question?
Yes. Can you share what percentage of your sponsorship revenue covers the cost of the entire event?
Okay, so that's a good question. So I know this. So the whole event and then the sponsorship revenue. So sponsorship revenue for us is probably about 60% of the entire event. And the rest is, well, I wouldn't say the rest, but another, let's say 10 to 20% is registration fees. And then the rest is probably justified by the business that we do on site, because this is a customer conference. So, we're meeting with our customers, we're talking about products that they use and products they could be using, and we know the attribution of what we can result back to this event. And so those 3 things would be kind of how we justify the total cost. But yes, sponsorship is a huge part of that. We're very lucky that we do a ton of trade. So the AV company wants to trade with us too, because they want to, their audience is our audience. We have a mutual audience. It's not the case with everyone, so I don't talk too much about trade, but trade, if anybody does do trade of service or type of trade or barter, talk to me because I have a lot of thoughts on this. And I feel like it's been an ever-evolving thing, is how do you manage trade? How do you trade trade? Is it rack rates? Is it like after cost rates, and little things like that. How do you recognize them? You know, are they with the levels or are they service partners, or, you know, it's like I could do a whole nother session on trade. But yeah, a lot of our business is trade. We count that as revenue because it's pure cost avoidance. So that is saving us dollars, so we count it as dollars, and it's probably 60%. Is that, do you guys, I guess, what is the percentage of sponsorship at your events? Is it around 50, 60%? Is it larger? I guess, show me your hands if it's less than 50%. Okay, and more than like 60%. So a really high percentage of your events is reliant on sponsorship revenue. So I used to work for a nonprofit, and we were all about not relying on membership dues, right? So it was like you have to have a revenue model for your organization for the whole year that doesn't rely totally on revenue, on membership dues, because then if your dues go down because of the economy, you have to have a diverse. So I look at events that way too, and I think sponsorship is certainly super important, but having other revenue streams, pre-conference events that you can charge for, trainings, things like that. So the follow-up, this is really a quick section, actually. I do an ROI report for my largest sponsors where I take those photos that I took, and I take the number of leads from the portal, and I actually do some weird calculation to figure out the number of times people saw their logo. How many people visited the website, how many people attended and on average passed this big sign we have 3 times. So I come up with a large number of like 1.4 million impressions because their logo was in 5 places and seen by all these people. So really these numbers help them take that back to their boss and say, look, we spent a lot of money this year, but look at all this ROI we got. And then I read the feedback surveys of theirs, but also other people's. And when they mention their sponsorship, like, oh my gosh, that periodical session was the best, I relay that to them. So those feedback surveys are key. And then post-event, having those conversations, you know, and really understanding the quality of the leads they got, and not necessarily quantity, that's so important, and then their experience in hearing about that. And then last but not least, getting quotes. So I get a lot of quotes from sponsors, and I'm like, can you tell me, you know, they'll say how great something was, and I'm like, can I actually just quote you, because I'd love to put that in the prospectus next year and talk about that. So, good question.
How often do you reassess sponsorship pricing?
Every year. Really, every year I change 1, 2, 5, 6, 7 things because I'm tweaking it. It didn't sell, or it sold too fast, or, you know, I felt like it was priced too low or too high for one reason or another. We really try to look at it fresh each year. I mean, we flip the prospectus and then we go through and change benefits that we felt didn't work or were too expensive for us. Like, we're really looking at it on an annual basis. Was there another one? Yeah.
I'm curious when it comes to sponsors like Visit San Antonio. When it comes to sponsors like Visit San Antonio or Caesars in the past, is that something that you are involved in, or is that more the event planning team and then they come in and say, hey, Visit San Antonio wants to do this, what sort of activations can we give them?
Yeah, it's a combined effort for sure. They're looking at the city and the requirements we have to go to a city. One of those requirements being a sponsorship. That's how we would determine between multiple cities is the level of sponsorship. And then I help define that sponsorship so that we know that they've set aside X amount of dollars, and then I would meet with them to say, okay, how can we utilize that the best way? What are your marketing goals? And here's what we offer, and here's where we could be customized. And our event planners are very involved because they have some great ideas as well, but it's definitely we're making sure we've hit all of our different requirements. So the only thing I didn't really get a chance to talk about that I want to talk about really quick in 52 seconds is Cvent products. So I thought I had a slide on this, but maybe I didn't, but I mentioned a few. RFID trusses to measure traffic going into an area so that you can capture that and use that in your prospectus. Push messages. This is something that we do to amplify certain things and make them more valuable. Make sure you visit the Chuck's Fazio Headshot Lounge, sponsored by American Express, just to kind of give them some extra recognition, make sure we're driving traffic. Attendee Hub ads, this is new this year, something I added on to a few contracts, sometimes as a favor, or maybe we owed them, sometimes just as like an upsell for a few $1,000s, but in Attendee Hub, you're able to have ads on that homepage, the session page, and the exhibitor page now. Such a good add-on. Or even you can add it as a benefit for platinum level sponsors. It's just like an added benefit, no extra cost. Depends how you want to structure it. Push messages, Attendee Hub ads, obviously using the exhibitor portal for them to scan leads, collect leads, report leads. All that is so good. I love that part. So that's it. That's my whole world of sponsorship right now. I feel like I'm just finishing this and getting started right away on our European conference next week. So I love it. And I love hearing from people who do the same thing as I do. I feel like it's ever evolving. I'm always looking for sharing best practices and discussing challenges and how we overcome things. So I do have a few business cards if anybody ever wants to chat. I'm happy to set up a Zoom meeting and talk one-on-one. But thank you.